The election season is upon us. What I am going to do is I am going to give a particular candidate the benefit of the doubt. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to give this candidate the benefit of the doubt. What do I mean by that? I am only going to judge or look at the history of this candidate from January the 1st, 2020 up until now. I don't want to hear anything about what this candidate did in the past, whether it was true or false. I don't want to hear his merits. I don't want to hear anything that he did that raised eyebrows. I'm only going to judge this candidate. I'm only going to look at what this candidate has done from January 1st, 2020 to now. And at the end of this, my question to this candidate is, do you really want my vote? Okay, this particular candidate knew that at the end of January, there was a pandemic or a virus that was potentially coming to the United States. And this candidate had the power to act upon this. What I mean by act upon it, let the country know, come up with a plan as to how we as the country was going to combat this pandemic. This candidate did not even tell the public that there was a serious threat to our normal way of life. The end of January, this candidate did not do this. In February, it was obvious to the country that the pandemic was already here in the United States. This candidate had the opportunity at this point in time, take any day you want in February, to inform the public of the seriousness of this. This candidate, day in and day out, not only did they denounce that this was a pandemic, at one point this candidate was calling it a hoax by the other party within the White House, within Congress. This candidate held rallies denouncing it, calling it a hoax, saying it really wasn't that big of a deal. As a matter of fact, this particular candidate said that he believed that this was a version of the flu. This is what this candidate told the public. Behind closed doors, he was telling someone else that this was really serious and it was airborne and this could be a real threat to our way of life. In addition to that, this particular candidate's advisors, both medical and political advisors, were telling this candidate the same thing, meaning this could be a real threat to your presidency, to your legacy, because this particular candidate has a serious ego, which is fine. I expect that. This particular candidate, here it is, beginning of March, this particular candidate made a decision to shut down the American economy, meaning stay-at-home orders, put the emphasis on each particular state, the governors of the state, to make some decisions as to how they were going to stop the spread of this now known disease that actually kills. This particular candidate stated that it was his hope that the economy, the American people, will be back to work, back from self-isolation, if you would, by Easter. He wanted them back praying, although this particular candidate is not a religious person, which is irrelevant, but I still needed to note that. So this particular candidate also stated that this would just go away. He said that it would miraculously disappear when the weather got warmer. As this particular candidate was going through these shenanigans, briefing the public that this was, in fact, would go away, the number of infected rose. The number of deaths began to rise significantly. And some parts of the country more so than others, New York, some cases in Washington. But me, as an undecided voter, I am listening to all of this. Easter came, the economy didn't open back up. There were still parts of the country who had stay-at-home orders in place, and it didn't happen. Now, a serious thing happened in May. There was a murder of an American citizen by the police department of a particular state. Videotaped, mind you. This was videotaped, and the law enforcement actually killed an unarmed man. Regardless if the unarmed man, it doesn't matter what this unarmed man did. It really doesn't. He was unarmed, and the police, not only did they murder this unarmed man, there were several police around the person who actually murdered this unarmed man, and they did nothing. They just stood by. When I say people around them, other law enforcement, other policemen, the public began to protest. This particular candidate never expressed condolences to the family of this particular person who was murdered by the law enforcement, nor did this particular candidate express any sympathy upon the city and the state in which this happened. This particular candidate took this opportunity to say that, to speak on the Black Lives Matter movement, to say that these were people, not necessarily everyone in the Black Lives Matter movement, but this type of movement is condoning rioting, looting, and things of that nature. This particular candidate went on to further stand by the policeman who, in fact, murdered or stood by and watched this candidate murdered. Watched this American citizen murdered. Although the video is right there. This particular candidate, not only as this was going on and the protests, most of the protests, and when I say most, I'm talking about 91, 92%, you can fact check me on that, were peaceful protests. Not to mention, we know in our country that when people protest, this is an opportunity to sow in propaganda. What do I mean by this in this particular case? There were people who were out posing as protesters, but deliberately intentionally vandalizing property, and then spray painting Black Lives Matter on some of this property that was vandalized. That's not to say that someone out in the Black Lives Matter movement wasn't doing this, but these particular people were sewn in to make it appear as though there is a problem with the Black Lives Matter. Not soon after this happened, there was a protest going on in Portland, Oregon, and this particular candidate then insisted that Democratic-ran states, Democratic-ran cities, was the cause of this, meaning the mayors and the government were the cause of the reasons behind these things happening, these protests, and the violence that came with the protests, meaning those who chose to loot to take away from the cause of the real cause of the protest. This particular candidate attacked the mayor of Portland in a way that I had never seen. as a person who this particular candidate wants me to vote for. This particular candidate, now all the while that this is going on with the death in Minnesota, the protest that was going on in Portland, keep in mind that the coronavirus, the death toll and the cases continue to rise. This particular candidate then conducted several interviews, continued to conduct interviews where he was saying that the virus would go away. He even suggested that he could take some drugs that were unproven scientifically by the scientists and the FDA and the CDC, that it will magically cure you or make you immune from this. I mean, hydrochloroquine and bleach. I mean, he was just coming up with all kind of stuff. He said this to the American people, this particular candidate, and what he ended up doing was, because this is election season, he continued to have rallies, and during these rallies, a lot of people, thousands of people, not as many as this particular candidate wants you to believe that was there, but there were thousands of supporters at these rallies. They were not adhering to the CDC guidelines saying that you should social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands often. They were not adhering to all of those. They were adhering to, we believe, that they came in and they was getting their temperatures checked and things like this. But these were crowded events. This particular candidate had a former senator that actually was attending one of these rallies of his, and he contracted the coronavirus, COVID-19, and this particular former senator actually passed away within 30 days of contracting the virus. This particular candidate said nothing on behalf of this particular senator. Keep that in mind. During another interview from this particular candidate, he was on record as to saying that this particular candidate stated that I've done more for the African American people in the United States than anyone in U.S. history, with the exception of perhaps Abraham Lincoln. That's what this particular candidate said. During this same interview, this particular candidate also said, when asked a question about the thousands of lives that have died from COVID, this particular candidate stated, "It is what it is. But many, many more lives, millions," he says, "would have been lost had he not closed the country down and prevented people from China from coming into the country." Although it should be noted that the facts is he did not stop people from coming in from China, and it's also been proven that the virus, the coronavirus, actually came in, brought into the United States from Europe, with people coming into New York, New Jersey, and a few in Washington. So Seattle, Washington area. This particular candidate continued throughout the summer to say that this virus will go away. This particular candidate continued to have rallies and was not adhering to the CDC guidelines. This particular candidate continued to downplay this coronavirus. This particular, although on tape behind closed doors, he admitted that he was downplaying and that he wanted to always downplay it so that it wouldn't create a panic for the public. But the panic that he was talking about was the panic on the stock market. This particular candidate will have you believe that he has the best interests of the American people in mind when he's making these decisions. But in fact, this particular candidate's best interest is only those wealthy people. When I say wealthy, we talk about million/billionaires. And oh, by the way, this particular candidate, for 2 years, this particular candidate claims to be a billionaire. for 2 years, recent years, I'm talking 2016, 2017, this particular candidate paid in federal tax, this billionaire, a so-called billionaire, paid $750 in 2016 in federal tax. And here's the key. 2017, he paid the exact same amount. I have never did my taxes and had to pay or receive the exact same dollar amount ever. None of us can say that. But this particular candidate will have you believe that. This particular candidate, as the summer was drawing to a close and sports, the football season and some of these other sports that was coming into, this particular candidate will have you believe that although the scientists and these officials at these college campuses around the country were stating that it's not a good idea to fully open back up campuses and or play football, this particular candidate will have you believe that he made phone calls to some of these conferences, we're talking football at the moment, and told them that they need to open up, they need to have college football and the sports back on the campuses for Americans to enjoy through a pandemic. This particular candidate would have you believe that it was he who brought the Big Ten back to playing football, because there was a vote, to by the commissioner of that particular league and then the presidents of each college not to play football for medical reasons, for the benefit or for the health of the athlete. Then later, they came, when I say later, about 3 weeks later, they voted to actually start the season or the league, because other colleges and other conferences had already started. This particular candidate then would want you to believe that, well, let's back up for a minute. This particular candidate, there was video shown that, or evidence shown that this particular candidate were talking about military service members, both past, both alive and dead. This particular candidate were saying about the dead that they, what was in it for them that they died for the country, or why were they in this war, participating in this war? What's in it for them? I'm paraphrasing what this particular candidate said. Then on some of the known American heroes from the standpoint of the military, he then labeled that certain people labeled as heroes were really not heroes. They were suckers and losers. This particular candidate called a Vietnam prisoner of war a sucker and a loser, basically called him a sucker for being caught by the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. When this came out, when the news came out of this particular candidate denied saying these things. He also denied that he made the statements, what's in it for him, when he had the opportunity to visit Normandy, the site Normandy, and to visit some of the fallen soldiers and heroes. He denied that, although it was on tape, camera. This particular candidate would have you to believe that mail-in ballots are corrupt. There is no substantial evidence. Actually, there's no evidence whatsoever that voter fraud exists in the United States. But this particular candidate will have you to believe this. This particular candidate, through all of the things that I just shared with you, and all of the rallies he continued to have, and he had a Rose Garden event outside, but still close knit. Very few people wearing masks. Now, when I talk about these events he's having, we're talking about members of Congress are there. We're talking about people in positions of authority that really govern our United States. They are there because they're on this particular candidate's team for whatever reason. It's fair to say that it's political, but at this point, it's tough to believe that you would put your political beliefs over your humane beliefs or your human beliefs. But he had an event. He knew, let me not say he knew, this particular candidate contracted the coronavirus, yet he would not reveal to the American people when he was last tested for the virus. But this particular candidate will have you believe that he's tested every day, when in fact it's not him that was tested every day. It was members around him who was claimed to have tested every day. In other words, if you needed to be around this person, if you have any business with this particular candidate, then you need to be tested. And if you were, negative, you can conduct your business. If not, you can't get around this person. So this particular person contracted the virus. This particular candidate was hospitalized. This particular candidate, on 2 separate occasions during his hospitalization, was on O2 because his oxygen levels had dropped below 93, 94%. This particular candidate then forced his doctors. Now, mind you, his chief physician is a commander in the United States Navy. Now, why did I say that? Because I am a retired United States sailor as well. And this guy's not retired, but my point in saying this is, it's shameful that there's an officer that's a part of the Navy that is giving in to the demands of a person who may not have his own health in his best interest. But this particular candidate continued to tell this commander what to say about his health. If that's the case, what's the purpose of a doctor if I'm going to tell my doctor what I want you to reveal to the public who I am serving for? But this particular candidate did this. So the case that the COVID case, or I should say the severeness of the case, required this particular candidate to, at worst, be hospitalized from 7 to 10 days. This particular candidate was out of the hospital in 3.5 days, and then stated that he was trying to get out of the hospital the day after he was admitted to the hospital. 3.5 days he's out. This particular candidate on the 4th day that he's going back to his place of residence, shot a video, took the mask off for all to see, and was having trouble breathing even then, having walked up a few flights of stairs. This particular candidate then decided to start going on rallies, and now this particular candidate is still saying, or still not saying rather, when the last time he had a negative test for COVID. This particular candidate has took it upon himself, him and his flunkies. I'm not going to mention the states by name. What I'm going to say is these flunkies of this particular candidate has removed drop-off boxes where you can then drop off your mail-in ballot. You know why they did that? Do you know that in this particular state, which is, by the way, one of the largest states in the United States, there would only be one drop box in this county for you to drop off your mail-in ballot, or drop off your ballot, I should say. Which would mean that you would have to drive about an hour to an hour and 15-minute, traffic pending, to go and take your ballot and drop it off at one of these drop boxes. Well, this drop box, because there's only one in the county. But this particular candidate's governor wants it that way. Not only so that it can deter you from voting, but this particular governor is up for re-election himself. So at the same time that this particular candidate is telling the American people, those that would not vote for him, that is, to that mail-in ballots are a fraud and it's corruption and things like that. This particular candidate, does he want my vote? Of course he doesn't want my vote. It's not that he wants, of course he wants my vote, but he only wants my vote if I vote for him. The fact is, he doesn't want me to vote at all. And you know what that's called, besides sad? It's called voter suppression. This particular candidate knows that if I take all of the things that I've shared for this calendar year, and oh, by the way, there are so many more things that happened during this particular year that I could talk about that this particular candidate has done, but it's just this video would never end. It's just so many, because almost every day of this calendar year, there's something more or something else that he's added upon this. Like, I'm not even going to go there. So what I did was I've just given you a snapshot of some of the things that this particular candidate has done. And you may be asking yourself, what about the other candidate? The other candidate that's running for the presidential election, I can't even say what he or she or he has done, because he is not in the position, or has not been given the opportunity, because he's not in the position that this other candidate is in, to have made all of these comments and these decisions and things of that nature. This person is not the president. So that's why I have not said anything. I can't go by and speculate what the other candidate would do or would have done, or how he would have acted if he was the person in charge of the pandemic, or if he was the person who had to try to put a stop to the violence that was going on in Minnesota or Portland or Chicago and some of the other cities. I can't do that, because he is not the person that's in charge of that. So that's why all I'm trying to do, I'm looking for a reason to vote for this particular candidate. So all of the things I've given you, I've presented right now, how can I vote for this particular candidate given all of the things that I just stated? And as I stated, there are many other things that I could go into detail about this particular candidate. Many other things. But what would be the point? They would still lean towards the same thing. So I've asked myself this, and I've come to the conclusion, in wrapping this up, that this particular candidate does not want my vote. Which is why, because many Americans, it doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't even matter which political party you favor. This particular candidate knows that his track record would only conclude that we should not vote for this particular candidate. It has nothing to do with his personality. It has nothing to do with anything before January the 1st, 2020. So let's just say December 31st, 2019 and before, when he was first inaugurated, that he was the ideal president for the people. Let's say he was just the people's champ, if you would. That he did so much for the country, and he so much for African Americans to decreased unemployment, and let's say he raised minimum wage, and let's just say that he did have a decent track record for the Hispanic community and the older women and the suburban women, and let's just say that he did all of that from the time he was inaugurated till December 31st, 2019. Even having done all of that, and then if you measure what I've given you from January the 1st till now, how do you think that scale is going to tip? He did these things that were good. Let's just say he did. And he did all of the things that I've talked about, to include many other things. He did all those things. Does this particular candidate deserve my vote? That's the question. The answer to that question is, it doesn't matter if he deserves my vote or not. What matters is this particular person does not even want me to vote. Why is that? Because this particular candidate knows that if I was given the opportunity to vote, that how could I possibly vote for this particular candidate with all of this? And oh, by the way, all of this is substance. These are not just things I've made up. These are things that can be proven. Okay, these ain't allegations. These ain't assumptions. These ain't conspiracy theories. This isn't any of those things. Substance. Even if you are a person who was uneducated, or not as educated as the whomever, a politician, or even if you don't have a high school diploma, I'm just looking for ways to give this particular candidate a chance to even have me consider voting for him. So let's say I'm low income, uneducated, don't get into politics, but I've just been given all of that and the God-given common sense that each voting American has. How can this person get my vote? He can't. But here's the killing part. He knows that. He knows he can't get it. And because he knows he can't get it, he is formulating this hoax, this theory that since I can't win, I might as well sit back and I'm going to quote, well, I'm not even going to do that. He would rather just sit back and watch the country burn. He can't have it, then watch it burn. Oh, by the way, I didn't even talk about some of his issues about not denouncing white supremacy groups and things like that. I'm not even going to go there. Or how the real reason that he wants to remain in office has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with the American people. The real reason he wants to stay in power or in office is so that he will not be brought up on charges of all the things that certain prosecutors are just waiting till the election is over to go after this young man with substantial evidence. That's the real reason why this particular candidate wants to be elected or / re-elected. That is it. And with that being said, that's really all you really need to know. There's a person that wants to be the president of the United States for the sole purpose of avoiding going to prison on charges that he is guilty of or will be proven guilty of. So here's the thing. If I go out and commit a crime, I know I committed the crime. I know I'm guilty of committing a crime. You have to prove to me, or you have to prove to a court or your peers or jury that I'm guilty of it. This candidate is no different. This particular candidate has gone out and committed crime upon crime upon crime. He knows he's guilty of these crimes. The difference is he knows that someone, meaning the federal prosecutors, have substantial evidence that confirms that he's guilty of this, and he's trying to block that by remaining in office. That's the type of person we want to run our country for the next 4 years. Because make no mistake about it, the president, for all of the things that you may or may not like about him, he is a direct representation of the people. So this 37% of his base that's out here and doesn't really care about the rest of the American public by not wearing masks, and doesn't care if he's out here, doing some tax fraud, tax evasion. They don't care about all that. You know why? Because he is a direct reflection, direct representation of them. This is how they think, for the most part. Because, and why do I say that? It's simple. How in the world could you support a person with all of that I've given you? How could you? The only way you can do that is you have to have some similarities, or you have to be thinking the same way this guy does for the most part, or in a lot of ways, or else you wouldn't support him. That's just a fact. And I'm not bringing religion into this, if I'm a Christian, if I practice Christianity, let's go that route, and there's a person who practices Satanism, how would I be able to get along with this person if I started to get along with this person and believe and support him? I'm using that word, support this person. Then that means, by definition, just by common sense, really, that I really support some of his beliefs. You can't say, oh, well, I don't care what his way of life. I don't care what he practices. I believe in him. I believe in him. You believe in but you're believing in some of the things that in some ways you're believing, or you're not, you don't have a problem with what he preaches or what he believes in, what his practice is. And I say that only I'm throwing that out there for you to look at it in the sense that you just really can't support a tree that without understanding the roots of the tree. That's what I'm saying. So 37% of the country supports him. But here's the thing. I wonder if they're going to support him. I wonder what's going to happen as it gets close or to election time, and they find or figure out if they realize that he cannot win or will not win. It's interesting to see how that's going to turn out. And the people I'm talking about now are not his 37% support base. I'm talking about those people who are in Congress. I'm talking about those Republican senators and things like that. It's going to be interesting to see how they do. We know they'll turn on you. They did it before. They turned on Senator Doyle back in '94, I believe, when they saw, or '92, when they saw '96, I believe, when they saw that he couldn't win. They just turned on him. In other words, they start fending for themselves. They started saying, well, listen, this guy's not going to win the presidency, so we're not going to have the White House, but I better do what I need to do to keep my position in Congress. I need to start fending for myself, because I'm not going down with the ship, basically. And that's what they did. The Republicans turned on him. But this particular candidate I'm talking about has such a stronghold on the Republican Party right now. It's going to be interesting to see if they do the same thing. And oh, by the way, this particular candidate is not even a Republican at all. Go figure that out. So I present these things to you, brothers and sisters, only to get you to open up your mind and do not allow people to keep your voice close. It's you have an obligation to vote, whether you vote for this particular candidate or the other candidate. To me, I want you to go out and vote. We all have common sense, and like I stated before, it doesn't really matter your economic background. It doesn't matter your educational background. What matters is utilize a little common sense. Take everything in front of you and make your decision on that. Don't make your decision on propaganda or trying to lean towards a person because they want you to or your friends want you to. I would like for you to look at it from the standpoint of what's best for myself, my family, my neighborhood, my community, and then which in turn will make it better for the American people, which in turn would make it better for the for the country itself. There is no great candidate. There is no candidate that doesn't have flaws. There's no candidate that's right about everything. There's no candidate that in some ways are not leaning or wants you to vote for their party without some type of agenda. But that's politics. What you need to do, or what you should do, is take the things that I've given you and decide. Because I hear many voters over the years, I'm a little older than most, over the years I've heard people say, well, both candidates are crooked, I'm not going to vote for either one of them. This particular year, I would challenge you not to think that way. Because one of these particular candidates is counting on you not voting. I would rather you go out and vote, look at the ballot, look at the sheet. You don't have to go all the way down Republican or all the way down Democrat. You don't have to do it that way. What you should do is look at the facts that's presented to you, the facts, the ones that can be backed up with evidence, and then make the best decision that you can possibly make, keeping in mind of why you are voting. Once you do that, I think you'll make the best decision that's for yourself, for your family, for your community, and then for America, your fellow brothers, sisters. I think you'll do the right thing, all right? Please don't let this opportunity pass up, and it's not about being a part of history or anything like that. Go out and vote. Make it your business to vote, because where you or what you vote on, or how you vote, I should say, is really going to determine the course of the country, not just the next 4 years. How you vote is going to determine the country in the next 15, 16 years. So some of us can't look past our little window, but we need to, because it's important. Thank you. God bless America.